Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Do you have time to talk about our Lord and Savior Greece? As a fan of geography, I love Greece. On a map or a globe, it is located right here on the Mediterranean Sea. It covers approximately 50.9 thousand square miles and has a very Mediterranean climate, meaning it has dry summers and wet winters. It has many islands around it, such as Crete, and it contains many mountains as well, including the Pindus mountain range and Mount Olympus. There's also many forests throughout Greece, and there are also beautiful beaches there too, making it one of the best geographies of any country I have ever seen by far. The first people to live in Greece were known as the Minoans. They lived on the island of Crete and were the first advanced European civilization. They were contemporary with ancient Egypt primarily, and their namesake is from King Minos, which the Minotaur is named after. Fun fact. Some major things that they did was they built the Palace of Knossos. I might be pronouncing that right. I I might not be. But anyway, eventually they were wiped out by a volcano, and most of what we know from them is via the palace at Knossos, which is right somewhere on right here on this map. Yes, I found it. I am good with maps. Right there. Following the Minoans was the Mycenaean Age, which existed partially with the Minoans, but in a different place. They had an economy primarily built on Mediterranean trade, and they also contain the first records of written ancient language in Greece. As you can see here, I have attempted to recreate something they might have said. This loosely translates to potato soup. In addition to that, their cities were ruled primarily by kings, and much of their pottery and art is believed to be borrowed from Minoan Greece. They also constructed many wall paintings and were contemporary with ancient Egypt. And the Mycenaean Age ended with the Bronze Age collapse. Yeah. Following the Mycenaean Age, we come to the Greek Dark Ages, which started with the Bronze Age collapse, which is when it is theorized either the Dorians or the Sea People attacked Greece and Egypt and Anatolia. It also could have been caused by natural disaster. Really, not a lot is known, and that is primarily because many writing systems that existed during the time were destroyed, or at least the people who used them stopped using them after the Bronze Age collapse, which meant not a lot of records were kept of what actually happened. I believe most of what we know is because of Egypt. But so linear B writing, potato soup writing ceased to exist. Trade that used to be vital to various cities' economies ceased to be for a while. But most Greeks just lived how they used to. It wasn't really like everybody was depressed all the time in a sense of a dark age. It was more a dark age as in not a lot happened. There weren't a lot of advancements. It was very slow. But also in this time, Greece adopted Phoenician writing systems, which are what is still used today, which is pretty rad. Following the Dark Age, we enter the Archaic period. During the Archaic period, there were many advancements in culture that laid the foundation for the Classical period, which would follow it. During this time, city-states were formed, which served as like their own independent governing bodies from each other. So like if states in the United States were their own countries, they'd be kind of like city-states. Or think of the game Civilization, where there's all these different city-states that are independent from your civilizations. Among these were Athens and Argos, which were some of the larger ones, and they were formed by small groups of towns coming together to form one bigger city. Also around this time, Greek colonization occurred across the Mediterranean Sea, primarily in Italy and more specifically in the island of Sicily, where there would be many Greek settlements, where unlike other kinds of colonization, these were made as independent settlements and not dependent on their home city. Also in this time, the Odyssey and the Iliad were written, which are two famous Greek pieces of literature that occur. Greece's unique military unit is the hoplite, which was used in both the classical and the archaic period. The hoplite was a military tactic that is when soldiers packed tightly into a formation with long spears and shields that would lock together, which is called a phalanx. The hoplite was really only like a military status you could be if you were a free citizen wealthy enough to afford bronze armor and the other equipment necessary. Um, this tactic made Greek armies very hard to penetrate, and they were pretty effective, especially against like Persia. Yeah, we did a good job against Persia. We'll get to that eventually. Um, Other unique units might include a phalanx. Really, is all I could come up with, um, which is not definitely not the same thing. Um, Moving on. Next, we have the classical period. The classical period is home to many of our greatest leaders, one of which is Pericles, who I am very obviously dressed as. Pericles was considered the first citizen of Athens, and he founded what the Western world sees today as democracy. He was born in Athens, obviously, to upper class parents, and he joined the Athenian government with a goal to make it more inclusive to people of every social class. That made him very popular, and he was able to rise up the ranks of government to eventually be the leader of Athens. That he then fought in the Persian Wars against Persia, which Greece won, and he attempted to consolidate more power by creating the Delian League to be an Athenian empire. Whether that worked or not, we will not discuss. But all in all, Pericles was a very influential leader in our government today, even as he was the first representation of democracy in the Western world. And we should all look to Pericles to make ourselves better as leaders. Other potential leaders for our civilization could be Leonidas, the king of Sparta, or King Otto, the first king of Greece. Cool. Greece's unique ability is Plato's Republic, which I do not own, so I have this other book called Gods and Heroes of Ancient Greece. Very interesting read, or at least I assume it is whenever I get around to reading it. Anyway, Plato's Republic is one of the many dialogues written by Plato, one of the most influential Greek philosophers, or just philosophers in general. The dialogue asks questions about justice and whether happiness comes with or without justice, and a bunch of other stuff, but I didn't have time to read it. Yeah. This was assigned to our civilization because Greece, more specifically Athens, was very influential in the creation of democracy and many of the systems in which the Western world uses today, which is also why we get an extra government policy slot in the game, which represents how we helped found earlier forms of democracy. Also during the classical period, we have the Greco-Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian War. The Greco-Persian War is when Persia and Greece went to war, and Greece united and was able to defeat Persia, which is pretty cool. There's a movie about it. The Peloponnesian War is when Athens and Sparta went to war. And that was fun because Athens and Sparta are cool. Um, there's probably a movie about that. If not, I think it's the plot of an Assassin's Creed game. Moving on.
Also during the classical period was the construction of the Parthenon and the Athenian Acropolis, which leads us into our unique building, which is the Acropolis. Acropolis quite literally translates to upper city and is a portion of a town built on an upper area, which is which often was a steep hill because it was defensible. Acropolises were used as a last resort if the city was being invaded. But eventually, as the threat invasions lessened, they were converted into markets, temples, theaters, government buildings, and other housing areas. Uh, to some cities, they were places of religious significance, and the most well known Acropolis was located in Athens. Nowadays, they primarily serve as tourist attractions. Alternative for the Acropolis that my group came up with is the Temple of Zeus, which could replace the holy site since temples were very prominent in cities as well.
Hellenistic Greece was Greece under the Macedonian Empire, which was led by Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great's death, which came pretty quickly after he conquered Greece, kings primarily ruled the cities of Greece. Also during this time period, Euclid and Archimedes lived and did their thing, which was mostly math. Yeah, and then the Hellenistic period ended with Rome taking over Greece. Pretty cool.
Up next, we have Roman Greece, which is when Rome took over Greece. Roman Greece. Uh, Rome was able to assert its dominance over Greece after the defeat of Cleopatra, and Rome was already highly influenced by Greek culture as represented by their architecture, government, and religion. Many Roman emperors would visit Greece and even participate in Olympic Games. They would finish building projects such as the Temple of Olympian Zeus in Athens. And Roman Greece also marked the longest era of peace in Greek history. Um, Also during this time, Christianity took hold in Greece, which during Ottoman rule, which happens later, would prove to help kind of preserve Greek culture while owned by an empire that definitely wasn't influenced by Greek culture as much as Rome was. But all good things must come to an end, and as the Roman Empire was split, the era of Roman Greece came to an end, and Greece was no longer Roman. A sad day indeed. Following Roman Greece, we have Byzantine Greece, which was kind of like Roman Greece, and they were pretty similar. During this time, or at least in the early period of Byzantine Greece, Greece faced many invasions from Germanic tribes, but eventually that lessened because they redirected their focus to Rome, which is good for Greece, but bad for Rome. Uh, Originally, it was a very prosperous time for Greece. They began to urbanize a lot, and they had a lot of economic activity on the Mediterranean Sea. However, in the later years of the empire, threat of Bulgarian invasion was prominent, and Basil II, who you may remember as the leader all the teams in Seventh Hour World History lost to last season, was able to repel the Bulgarian invasion. But all good things must sadly come to an end, and the great Byzantine Empire was conquered by the Ottomans, which I've never cried about before, never. And thus ended Byzantine Greece and began Ottoman Greece. After the fall of Constantinople, Byzantine Greece was now Ottoman Greece. Cool. Uh, Luckily for the Greeks, under Christianity, Greek culture was preserved, primarily under the Greek Orthodox Church. Under the Ottoman Empire, Greece was still allowed a very large level of autonomy, so they were still able to like function as their own kind of state within the Ottoman Empire. But eventually, much later in the Ottoman reign, Greece, or Greeks more specifically, fell into serfdom, which was kind of like being a slave, but you had like a debt to pay off. And most commonly, those debts were to Ottomans, which led to eventually the Greek War of Independence. The Greek War of Independence first started when citizens began to fall under the influence of Enlightenment ideas, and thus in 1821 the Greek Revolution began, resulting in independence being declared in 1822, resulting in the first Hellenistic Republic, which was a provisional government that the Greeks set up. The Greeks were supported by Russia under the Catherine the Great, who was the leader of the Orthodox Church, which helped a lot, and also France and the UK, who they were all contemporaries with. Greece was eventually declared independent in 1829, and King Otto was declared the first king of an independent Greece in 1832, finally marking the first time in which the nation Greece existed to the entire world as the nation Greece. Modern Greece went through many different forms of government, and by many, I mean 5, which is a lot. Starting with the Kingdom of Greece, which started with King Otto and was plagued by military coups and instability, which will become a common theme the more we go throughout this video. Eventually, King Otto fled the country, and following World War I, which led to more instability, the Kingdom of Greece ended in 1924. After the Kingdom of Greece, the Second Hellenistic Republic was formed with this guy. Declared the first president of Greece. But again, the government was very unstable, and many more coups happened until one was successful, and the republic died again. Yeah. Next, we have my favorite of Greece's 5 governments, Kingdom of Greece II, Electric Boogaloo. This is when a second monarchy was established. However, the monarchy had to flee the country during World War II, and then a military coup in 1967 permanently ended the monarchy in Greece. Yeah, that was a very disappointing sequel to an original movie that was also very disappointing. Following the Kingdom of Greece II, Electric Boogaloo, came the military dictatorship ran by this guy. And eventually the dictatorship was just overthrown in 1974. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to say. There was a military dictatorship, and it ended eventually. Moving on. The Third Hellenistic Republic was established in 1974, which uses a parliamentary system and still is used today. That's all I really have to say about the Third Hellenistic Republic, because I'm really tired right now. Yep. In conclusion, I think we should all learn that while maybe not the most prevalent military power, Greece is definitely one of, if not the most influential cultural power of all time. They influence, at least in America, our democracy system, our architecture, the stories we tell. I mean, I have this book some 2,000 years after these stories existed, which has to say something about the preservation of Greek culture. And Greece has a very diverse history, and throughout it all, one idea of Greek culture was able to persist across 4,000 years of history, where we get to today, and we can still all remember this stuff and say, yeah, I can see where Greek culture has influenced modern day. I mean, Europe would be nowhere without Greece. North America would be nowhere without Greece. Who knows what Asia's up to? I bet the group who did India will tell you all about that. Anyway, thank you for watching my presentation, and yeah, that's about it. All hail Greece. I love Greece. Everyone will submit to Greece.